The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the weapon maintenance bay, casting harsh shadows across rows of disassembled rifles, pistols, and machine guns. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos sat hunched over her workstation, methodically cleaning the barrel of an M4 carbine with practiced precision. The familiar smell of gun oil and metal polish filled her nostrils as she worked, her calloused hands moving with the muscle memory of someone who had performed this task thousands of times. Around her, 24 other soldiers went about their own maintenance duties, the sound of metal on metal creating a steady rhythm throughout the cavernous room. Most were young privates and corporals, fresh-faced recruits who still fumbled with their cleaning rods and struggled to remember the proper order of disassembly. Maria watched them from the corner of her eye, occasionally offering quiet guidance when she saw someone making a mistake that could damage their weapon, or worse, put them in danger during combat. She had been in the Army for 12 years now, rising through the ranks from a nervous 18-year-old recruit to one of the most respected non-commissioned officers in the 82nd Airborne Division. Her specialty was weapons systems, and she knew every firearm in the military arsenal like the back of her hand. From the standard-issue M4 to the heavy machine guns mounted on vehicles, Maria could strip, clean, repair, and reassemble any weapon blindfolded. The maintenance bay was her domain, her sanctuary where the chaos of military life gave way to the orderly precision of mechanical work. Here, surrounded by the tools of her trade, she felt most at peace. The weapons didn't judge her for being one of only a handful of women in her unit. They didn't care that she had grown up in the housing projects of East Los Angeles, or that she had joined the Army to escape a life that seemed destined for poverty and violence. As she worked, Maria thought about her upcoming deployment. In 3 weeks, her unit would be shipping out to Afghanistan for their 3rd tour of duty. She had volunteered for every deployment, earning her a reputation as someone who never backed down from a fight. Her fellow soldiers respected her not just for her technical expertise, but for her courage under fire. During their last deployment in Iraq, she had single-handedly maintained the weapons systems for an entire forward operating base, often working 18-hour days to ensure that every rifle, every machine gun, every piece of equipment was in perfect working order. The young soldiers in the bay looked up to her with a mixture of admiration and intimidation. She was tough, demanding perfection from herself and others, but fair. She never asked anyone to do something she wouldn't do herself, and she had saved more than one soldier's life by catching a potentially fatal maintenance error before it could cause a weapon malfunction in combat. Maria's reputation extended beyond her own unit. Word had spread throughout the division about the sergeant who could fix anything and who never left a soldier with a malfunctioning weapon. Officers from other companies would sometimes request her services, and she had developed a network of contacts throughout the military that helped her acquire hard-to-find parts and specialized tools. But despite her success and the respect she had earned, Maria still felt the weight of being different. The Army was still very much a man's world, and she had to work twice as hard to prove herself worthy of the same respect her male counterparts received automatically, unstandably. She had learned to ignore the whispered comments, the questioning looks, the subtle suggestions that maybe she would be better suited for a desk job in administration or supply. Instead, she let her work speak for itself. When other soldiers saw her disassemble and rebuild a jammed machine gun in under 2 minutes while under enemy fire, arguments about whether women belonged in combat roles tended to fade away. When they watched her carry a wounded soldier to safety while simultaneously providing covering fire with a rifle she had personally maintained and zeroed, questions about her qualifications became irrelevant. The weapons she maintained were more than just tools to Maria. They were the lifeline that kept her and her fellow soldiers alive in hostile territory. Every spring she tightened, every surface she cleaned, every component she inspected could mean the difference between a soldier coming home or being carried back in a flag-draped coffin. This responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders, driving her to a level of perfectionism that bordered on obsession. She had seen what happened when weapons failed at critical moments. During her first deployment, a young private's rifle had jammed during a firefight because he had failed to properly clean the chamber after a training exercise. Maria had been forced to watch helplessly as enemy fire pinned him down, his weapon useless in his hands. She had crawled through 50 meters of open ground under intense fire to reach him, dragging him to safety while returning fire with her own perfectly maintained carbine. That incident had shaped her approach to weapon maintenance ever since. She instituted mandatory daily cleaning schedules, conducted surprise inspections, and created detailed checklists that every soldier had to complete before their weapon was considered mission-ready. Some complained about her rigid standards, calling her overly strict or obsessive, but none could argue with the results. Her unit had one of the lowest weapon malfunction rates in the entire division. The young corporal sitting across from her struggled with the trigger assembly of his rifle, fumbling with the small springs and pins that held the mechanism together. Maria watched him for a moment, noting the frustration building in his face as he tried unsuccessfully to fit the components back together. "Corporal Jenkins," she said quietly, her voice carrying easily across the workspace. "Bring your weapon over here." Jenkins looked up, relief evident in his expression as he gathered his rifle parts and approached her workstation. Maria had already cleared a space beside her, laying out a clean cloth and arranging her tools in precise order. "Show me what you're having trouble with," she instructed, watching carefully as he attempted to reassemble the trigger group. Within minutes, she had identified the problem and guided him through the correct assembly procedure. Her teaching style was patient but demanding, requiring him to repeat the process several times, until muscle memory began to take over. She explained not just how to perform each step, but why it was important, helping him understand the mechanical principles that governed the weapon's operation. "Remember," she told him as he successfully completed the assembly for the third time, "this rifle could save your life someday. Every time you clean it, every time you inspect it, you're investing in your own survival and the survival of your brothers and sisters in arms." Jenkins nodded seriously, understanding the gravity of her words. Like many of the younger soldiers, he had initially been skeptical of taking orders from a female sergeant, but Maria's expertise and dedication had quickly won his respect. He had heard the stories about her combat experience, her technical knowledge, and her unwavering commitment to the soldiers under her command. As the afternoon wore on, Maria continued her work, moving from weapon to weapon with methodical efficiency. She inspected each rifle thoroughly, checking for signs of wear, corrosion, or damage that might affect performance. Her trained eye could spot problems that others might miss: a slightly worn firing pin that could cause misfires, a gas tube that needed replacement, a scope mount that had worked loose and would throw off accuracy. The maintenance bay gradually emptied as soldiers completed their assigned tasks and returned to their barracks or other duties. Maria remained at her station, working on a particularly troublesome machine gun that had been giving the motor pool mechanics problems. The weapon had been jamming repeatedly during training exercises, and several mechanics had already given up on it, recommending it be sent back to depot for complete overhaul. But Maria was determined to fix it herself. She had stripped the weapon down to its component parts and was methodically examining each piece under a magnifying glass, looking for any sign of damage or wear that might explain the malfunction. It was tedious work, requiring intense concentration and attention to detail, but she found it satisfying in a way that few people would understand. As she worked, her mind wandered to thoughts of home and family. Her younger brother Diego had recently graduated from high school and was considering joining the military himself. Their phone conversations had been filled with his questions about military life, about the opportunities and challenges that awaited him if he chose to enlist. Maria tried to be honest with him about both the rewards and the hardships, wanting him to make an informed decision rather than being swayed by romantic notions of military glory. She thought about her mother, who still worried constantly about her safety despite Maria's reassurances that she was well-trained and well-prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Every phone call home began with the same questions about whether she was eating enough, staying safe, and taking care of herself. Maria understood her mother's concerns, especially given the neighborhood they had grown up in, where violence was a constant threat, and young people had few positive role models. The Army had given Maria structure, purpose, and a chance to excel in ways she had never imagined possible. It had also taught her discipline, leadership, and technical skills that would serve her well whether she chose to make the military a career or eventually transition to civilian life. But most importantly, it had given her a family of fellow soldiers who depended on her just as she depended on them. The machine gun finally yielded its secrets to her persistent examination. A tiny burr on the bolt face, invisible to casual inspection but enough to disrupt the weapon's timing, had been causing the jams. Maria carefully filed away the imperfection, polished the surface smooth, and began the process of reassembly. Within an hour, she had the weapon back together and functioning perfectly. ready to provide reliable service to whichever soldier would carry it into combat. As evening approached and the maintenance bay grew quiet, Maria reflected on the path that had brought her to this point. Every challenge she had overcome, every obstacle she had faced, had prepared her for the responsibilities she now carried. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new weapons to maintain, new soldiers to train and mentor, and in 3 weeks she would once again deploy to a combat zone where her skills and dedication would be put to the ultimate test. She carefully cleaned and organized her tools, ensuring that everything was ready for the next day's work. The weapons she had serviced were secured in their proper storage locations, each one tagged and documented according to regulations. Her workspace was spotless, ready for the next shift of soldiers who would continue the never-ending cycle of maintenance and preparation that kept the military machine functioning. As Maria finally prepared to leave for the day, she took one last look around the maintenance bay. This room, with its harsh lighting and smell of gun oil, had become as familiar to her as her childhood bedroom. It was here that she had proven herself worthy of the trust and respect of her fellow soldiers. It was here that she had honed the skills that might one day save lives in combat. And it was here that she had found her calling as both a technical expert and a leader of soldiers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she turned them off, one by one, leaving the maintenance bay in darkness until tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to serve her country and her fellow soldiers with the dedication and expertise that had become her trademark. 3 days had passed since Maria's late evening in the maintenance bay, and the routine of military life continued with its familiar rhythm. Morning physical training, weapons inspection, equipment checks, and the endless cycle of preparation that defined life in an active duty unit. The soldiers of the 82nd Airborne were approaching their final weeks before deployment, and the intensity of training had increased accordingly. Maria stood in formation with her squad during the morning briefing, listening as Lieutenant Colonel Harrison outlined the day's training schedule. The battalion would be conducting live fire exercises at the range, followed by equipment inspections and a briefing on updated rules of engagement for their upcoming mission, standard procedures that every soldier in the unit could recite from memory. But something felt different today. Maria noticed the way senior officers kept glancing in her direction during the briefing, subtle looks that seemed to carry meaning beyond casual observation. Colonel Harrison's aide, Master Sergeant Williams, had positioned himself where he could keep an eye on her throughout the formation. These small details, which might escape the notice of less experienced soldiers, set off alarm bells in Maria's mind. After the formation was dismissed, Maria made her way to the maintenance bay as usual. But she hadn't been there more than 20 minutes when Corporal Martinez appeared at her workstation, slightly out of breath from running. "Sergeant Santos," he said, trying to catch his breath. "You're wanted in the battalion commander's office immediately." Maria looked up from the rifle she had been inspecting, studying Martinez's face for any clue about what might have prompted this unexpected summons. The young corporal's expression gave nothing away, but she could see the curiosity in his eyes. Being called to see the battalion commander was never routine, especially not with the urgent tone that Martinez had conveyed. "Did they say what it was about?" Maria asked as she secured her work area and gathered her patrol cap. "No, Sergeant. Master Sergeant Williams just said to find you and tell you to report immediately." He seemed pretty serious about it. Maria nodded and made her way through the corridors of the administrative building, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she done something wrong? Was there a problem with one of the weapons she had recently serviced? Had someone filed a complaint about her training methods? Or perhaps this was related to the deployment. Maybe there had been a change in assignments or mission parameters. The battalion headquarters buzzed with activity as she approached Colonel Harrison's office. Staff officers moved purposefully through the corridors, carrying files and speaking in hushed tones. The atmosphere felt more charged than usual, as if something significant was happening beyond the normal scope of daily operations. Master Sergeant Williams looked up as Maria approached his desk outside the colonel's office. His expression was unreadable, professional in the way that senior non-commissioned officers had perfected over years of military service. "Sergeant Santos," he said, rising from his chair. "The colonel is waiting for you. Go right in." Maria knocked on the office door and waited for permission to enter. Colonel Harrison's voice called out from inside, authorizing her entry. She stepped through the doorway and immediately noticed that the colonel was not alone. Several other officers sat around the conference table, including Major Richardson from Intelligence and Captain Davis from Operations. At the head of the table sat a figure she didn't recognize, a general officer whose uniform bore the insignia of the Joint Special Operations Command. "Sergeant Santos, reporting as ordered, sir," Maria announced, snapping to attention and rendering a crisp salute. Colonel Harrison returned the salute and gestured toward an empty chair at the conference table. "Please, take a seat, Sergeant. We have some things to discuss with you." As Maria settled into the indicated chair, she tried to read the faces around the table for some indication of what was happening. The intelligence officer looked serious but not hostile. The operations officer seemed almost excited, as if anticipating something interesting. But it was the general at the head of the table who commanded her attention. General Patricia Mackenzie was a legend in special operations circles, though Maria had never expected to meet her in person. She had risen through the ranks in an era when opportunities for women in combat roles were even more limited than they were now. Her reputation for tactical brilliance and unwavering dedication to her soldiers was known throughout the Army. "Sergeant Santos," General Mackenzie began, her voice carrying the authority that came from years of command, "your reputation precedes you. I've been reviewing your service record, and I must say it's quite impressive." Maria felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. Having a general officer review her service record was either very good news or very bad news, and she wasn't sure which this represented. "Thank you, ma'am," she replied carefully. "Your technical expertise with weapon systems is well documented," the general continued. "But what interests me more are the reports of your performance under combat conditions. 3 separate occasions where you maintained critical weapon systems while under direct enemy fire. A rescue operation where you carried a wounded soldier to safety while providing accurate suppressive fire. These are not the actions of an ordinary soldier." General Mackenzie opened a thick folder and began reading from what Maria recognized as after-action reports from her previous deployments. Hearing her own actions described in such clinical, official language felt surreal. She remembered each incident vividly. The adrenaline, the fear, the split-second decisions that had seemed natural at the time but now sounded heroic when recounted by others. "There's something else that caught my attention," the general said, looking up from the folder. "Your ability to train and mentor other soldiers. Your unit has the lowest weapon malfunction rate in the division, and several soldiers have specifically credited your training with saving their lives in combat situations." Major Richardson leaned forward in his chair. "Sergeant, what we're about to discuss is classified at the highest levels. Before we proceed, I need to confirm that you understand the serious nature of what we're going to tell you." Maria nodded, her curiosity now thoroughly aroused. "I understand, sir." General Mackenzie closed the folder and fixed Maria with a steady gaze. "The Army is developing a new special operations unit, one that will handle some of our most sensitive and dangerous missions. We're looking for soldiers with a very specific set of skills, technical expertise, combat experience, leadership ability, and the mental toughness to operate independently in hostile environments." She paused, letting the implications of her words sink in. "Your name came up during our selection process, Sergeant. In fact, it came up repeatedly from multiple sources who recommended you without knowing that others had done the same." Maria's mind raced as she tried to process this information. Special operations had always been largely closed to women, though that was slowly beginning to change. The idea that she was being considered for such a unit was both thrilling and terrifying. "What would this involve, ma'am?" she asked. Captain Davis spoke up for the first time. "The unit would be tasked with missions that require both technical expertise and combat capability. Weapons maintenance and repair in forward operating positions, training friendly forces in hostile territory, and providing fire support for other special operations teams." "The training would be intensive," General Mackenzie added. 6 months of specialized instruction in advanced weapons systems, demolitions, communications, and unconventional warfare tactics. The physical and mental demands would be unlike anything you've experienced in your regular unit. Maria felt her heart racing as she considered the opportunity being presented to her. This was the kind of chance that came along once in a career, if at all. But she also understood that accepting would mean leaving behind the familiar world of her current unit, the soldiers she had trained and mentored, the comfortable routine that had defined her military life. "There would be risks," Major Richardson said quietly. "The missions this unit would undertake carry a higher casualty rate than conventional operations. You would be operating in small teams, often without the support structure you're accustomed to. General Mackenzie leaned back in her chair, studying Maria's face carefully. I won't lie to you, Sergeant. This program is experimental. We're breaking new ground, and that means there will be challenges we haven't anticipated. Some people in the Army aren't convinced that this type of unit is necessary, or that soldiers like you are capable of this level of operations. The weight of those words hung in the air. Maria understood that she wasn't just being offered an opportunity. She was being asked to prove a point, to demonstrate that women could serve effectively in roles that had traditionally been reserved for men. How much time do I have to decide? Maria asked. 24 hours, General Mackenzie replied. I know that's not much time for such a significant decision, but the training cycle starts next week. If you're interested, you'll need to report to Fort Bragg on Monday morning for initial evaluation. Colonel Harrison, who had remained silent throughout most of the briefing, finally spoke up. Sergeant, I want you to know that whatever you decide, you have my full support. You've been an outstanding soldier in this unit, and you'll be missed if you choose to accept this opportunity. As the meeting concluded, Maria found herself walking back to the maintenance bay in a daze. The weight of the decision before her felt enormous. Accepting the offer would mean leaving behind everything familiar and stepping into an unknown world of increased danger and responsibility. But it also represented the ultimate validation of her skills and dedication, a chance to serve at the highest levels of her profession. Back at her workstation, Maria tried to focus on her regular duties, but her mind kept returning to the conversation in the colonel's office. The other soldiers in the bay noticed her distraction, though none dared to ask what was troubling her. Word had already spread that she had been called to see the battalion commander, and speculation was running rampant throughout the unit. That evening, Maria sat alone in her quarters, staring at the photos on her desk. Pictures of her family back home, her fellow soldiers from previous deployments, the young recruits she had trained over the years. Each image represented a connection, a responsibility, a reason to stay with what was safe and familiar. But there was another voice in her head, one that reminded her of the dreams she had harbored since joining the Army. She had always wanted to serve at the highest level, to push herself to the limits of her abilities, to prove that she belonged among the elite soldiers who undertook the most challenging missions. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed her mother's number, and Maria hesitated before answering. How could she explain this opportunity to someone who already worried constantly about her safety? Mija. Her mother's voice came through the phone, warm and concerned as always. I was thinking about you today. How are you doing? I'm good, Mom, Maria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Just thinking about some things. You sound troubled. What's wrong? Maria closed her eyes, knowing that her mother's intuition had always been uncanny. I've been offered an opportunity, Mom. A chance to serve in a special unit. It's a big decision. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. When her mother spoke again, her voice was careful, measured. Is this something you want to do?
I think so.
Yes, I think I do. Then you should do it, her mother said simply. I raised you to follow your dreams, Mija. I raised you to be strong and brave. If this is what you want, then I support you. After the call ended, Maria sat in the darkness of her room, weighing all the factors that would influence her decision. The risks were real. Special operations units faced dangers that conventional soldiers rarely encountered. The training would be grueling, designed to push soldiers to their physical and mental limits, and there was no guarantee that she would succeed. The evaluation process would be rigorous, and many candidates would be eliminated. But as she thought about her conversation with General Mackenzie, Maria realized that this opportunity represented everything she had been working toward since joining the Army. The chance to serve alongside the most elite soldiers, to take on missions that would test every skill she had developed, to prove that her gender was irrelevant when it came to serving her country with distinction. The maintenance bay would continue to function without her. Other soldiers would take over the training and mentoring roles she had filled. Her current unit was strong enough to succeed without her contribution. But this special operations opportunity was unique, a chance that might never come again. As midnight approached, Maria finally made her decision. She would accept the offer, report to Fort Bragg for evaluation, and see if she had what it took to serve in this elite unit. The decision brought a mixture of excitement and apprehension, but also a sense of rightness that confirmed she was making the correct choice. Tomorrow, she would inform Colonel Harrison of her decision. She would begin the process of transitioning her responsibilities to other soldiers, and in just a few days, she would leave behind the familiar world of her current assignment and step into an uncertain but exciting future. The fluorescent lights in her quarters hummed softly as Maria finally prepared for bed, her mind already beginning to focus on the challenges that lay ahead. Whatever the future held, she was ready to meet it with the same dedication and courage that had brought her to this moment. Fort Bragg sprawled across the North Carolina landscape like a small city, its endless rows of barracks, training facilities, and administrative buildings housing some of the Army's most elite units. As Maria's transport vehicle wound through the base's maze of streets, she caught glimpses of soldiers engaged in various training activities. Paratroopers practicing jumps from training towers, Rangers conducting close-quarters combat drills, and Special Forces teams working on advanced tactical maneuvers. The Special Operations Evaluation Facility was located in a remote section of the base, surrounded by high-security fences and restricted access signs. Maria's vehicle was stopped at 3 separate checkpoints, her orders and identifications scrutinized by guards who took their security responsibilities seriously. The message was clear. Whatever happened beyond these gates was not meant for casual observation. When Maria finally arrived at the designated building, she found herself among a group of roughly 40 other soldiers, all gathered in a stark reception area that felt more like a medical clinic than a military facility. The other candidates were an impressive mix of backgrounds and specialties. She recognized the bearing of experienced infantrymen, the technical precision of engineers and explosives experts, and the quiet confidence of soldiers who had clearly seen combat. What struck her most was the diversity of the group. While the majority were men, there were several other women among the candidates, each carrying themselves with the same professional competence that had brought them to this point. This was not a token gesture or an experiment with lowered standards. These were elite soldiers being evaluated for elite roles. A master sergeant entered the reception area, his bearing and decorations marking him as someone with extensive special operations experience. His cold, evaluating gaze swept across the assembled candidates as he spoke. "Welcome to the Advanced Warfare Evaluation Program," he announced. "Over the next 10 days, you will be tested physically, mentally, and emotionally in ways that will determine whether you have what it takes to serve in our most challenging assignments." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Some of you will not complete this evaluation. That's not a reflection of your worth as soldiers. It's simply recognition that these roles require a very specific combination of skills and mental toughness. Those who don't make the cut will return to their units with honor and continue to serve with distinction." The evaluation began immediately, with comprehensive medical and psychological examinations. Maria found herself subjected to tests that probed every aspect of her physical and mental condition, stress tests that pushed her cardiovascular system to its limits, psychological assessments that explored her decision-making under pressure, and interviews with psychiatrists who seemed determined to uncover any weakness or vulnerability that might compromise her performance. The physical evaluation was unlike anything Maria had experienced in her regular military training. The candidates were put through obstacle courses that combined traditional military challenges with scenarios designed to test technical problem-solving under stress. One exercise required her to disassemble and repair a jammed weapon while suspended upside down from a rappelling rope. Another challenged her to provide accurate sniper fire while suffering from controlled exposure to tear gas. But it was the psychological evaluation that proved most challenging. The assessors seemed determined to find the breaking point of every candidate, subjecting them to scenarios designed to create maximum stress and confusion. Maria found herself in a simulated hostage situation where she was forced to choose between saving one group of civilians or another, with incomplete information and time running out. The scenario was designed to have no right answer, testing how candidates handled impossible decisions rather than their ability to find perfect solutions. Throughout the evaluation, candidates were eliminated regularly. Each morning brought news that several soldiers had been dismissed from the program, sent back to their units with thanks for their service, but notification that they had not met the standards required. The pressure was intense, knowing that any mistake, any moment of weakness, could result in immediate dismissal. Maria excelled in the technical evaluations, her years of experience with weapon systems serving her well. When presented with unfamiliar equipment or complex mechanical problems, she approached each challenge with the systematic methodology that had made her reputation in her regular unit. Other candidates struggled with some of the more esoteric weapons systems, but Maria found herself able to adapt quickly to new technology and unusual configurations. The leadership evaluations proved more complex. Candidates were placed in charge of teams consisting of their fellow evaluates and given missions that required them to coordinate multiple specialties under intense pressure. Maria found herself leading a team tasked with securing a simulated enemy weapons cache while under sniper fire and with limited ammunition. The exercise tested not just her tactical knowledge, but her ability to manage strong personalities and conflicting opinions among highly trained soldiers who were accustomed to being leaders themselves. One of her teammates during this exercise was Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, a ranger with multiple combat deployments, who initially seemed skeptical about taking orders from a female soldier. His resistance was subtle but noticeable, delayed responses to her commands, suggestions that maybe someone else should take point on certain aspects of the mission, body language that conveyed doubt about her capabilities. Maria recognized the challenge for what it was and addressed it directly but professionally. During a brief planning session, she pulled Mitchell aside for a quiet conversation. "Sergeant Mitchell," she said, looking him directly in the eyes, "I need to know if you have concerns about the mission or my leadership that we should address now." Mitchell's expression shifted, showing grudging respect for her direct approach. "No concerns about the mission, Sergeant. And I'm willing to follow your lead." "Good. Because in about 10 minutes, we're going to be depending on each other to complete this successfully. I need to know that when I give an order, you'll follow it without hesitation. And I need to know that if you see something I'm missing, you'll speak up immediately." The mission that followed demonstrated the effectiveness of clear communication and mutual respect. Mitchell proved to be an invaluable teammate, his combat experience complementing Maria's technical expertise perfectly. When enemy fire pinned down part of their team, Mitchell provided covering fire while Maria worked to disable an improvised explosive device that was blocking their escape route. Their coordination was seamless, each anticipating the other's needs and responding accordingly. After the exercise, Mitchell approached Maria with a different attitude entirely. "That was good work, Sergeant," he said simply. "I'd follow you into combat any time." The comment meant more to Maria than any official evaluation score. Earning the respect of experienced combat veterans was worth more than passing any test that instructors could devise. As the evaluation progressed, the remaining candidates were subjected to increasingly complex scenarios that combined multiple stressors. Sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, equipment failures, and time pressure were layered together to create conditions that would reveal how each soldier performed when pushed beyond normal limits. During one particularly challenging exercise, Maria found herself alone in a simulated enemy compound, tasked with gathering intelligence while avoiding patrols and security systems. The scenario required her to use skills that went far beyond her normal technical expertise: stealth movement, electronic surveillance, and improvised problem-solving under extreme stress. Halfway through the mission, her communications equipment failed, leaving her without contact with her support team. The natural response would have been to abort the mission and extract to safety, but the briefing had made it clear that mission completion was the primary objective. Maria made the decision to continue, adapting her approach to account for the loss of communications and relying on her own judgment to navigate the remaining challenges. When she finally emerged from the compound with the required intelligence, the evaluators seemed impressed by her adaptation to unexpected circumstances. One commented that her decision to continue the mission despite equipment failure showed exactly the kind of independent thinking and determination that they were looking for in special operations personnel. By the 7th day of evaluation, only 15 candidates remained from the original group of 40. The pressure had eliminated soldiers who might have been outstanding in their regular units but who lacked the specific combination of skills and mental toughness required for special operations. Those who remained had proven themselves capable of exceptional performance under conditions that would break most people. The final evaluations focused on integration and teamwork. The remaining candidates were formed into teams and given complex missions that required them to coordinate multiple specialties while operating with minimal support. Maria found herself working alongside soldiers whose backgrounds were vastly different from her own: a communications specialist from the Navy SEALs, an explosives expert from the Marines, and a medic from the Air Force's Special Tactics community. Their mission was to infiltrate a simulated enemy facility, disable its defensive systems, gather intelligence, and extract without being detected. The scenario required them to combine their individual specialties into a cohesive plan that could adapt to changing circumstances and unexpected challenges. Maria's role was to ensure that all weapons and equipment functioned properly throughout the mission, while also providing sniper overwatch during the team's extraction. The technical challenges were significant. The team's equipment included several prototype weapons systems that she had never encountered before, and the time available for familiarization was extremely limited. Working through the night before the mission, Maria studied technical manuals and schematics, testing and retesting each piece of equipment to ensure she understood its operation and potential failure modes. Her teammates contributed their own expertise, creating a comprehensive plan that accounted for multiple contingencies and assigned specific responsibilities to each team member. The mission itself was a testament to the effectiveness of careful planning and professional execution. When the team's primary communication system was compromised early in the operation, they seamlessly switched to backup procedures that Maria had helped develop. When an unexpected security patrol threatened to discover their position, her accurate sniper fire eliminated the threat without alerting other enemy forces. Most importantly, when one of her teammates was injured during the extraction phase, Maria abandoned her overwatch position to provide medical support, dragging the wounded soldier to safety while continuing to coordinate the team's fire support. Her actions during those critical minutes demonstrated the kind of selfless dedication and tactical flexibility that special operations missions required. The evaluation concluded with individual interviews, where each remaining candidate met with the assessment board to discuss their performance and their suitability for special operations assignments. Maria found herself facing a panel of senior officers whose experience spanned decades of military service in various special operations communities. "Sergeant Santos," the board president began, "your technical scores are among the highest we've recorded. Your leadership performance was consistently strong, and your ability to adapt to unexpected situations was impressive." He paused, consulting his notes. "But what stands out most in your evaluation is your commitment to mission accomplishment and the welfare of your teammates. Time and again, you put the success of the team ahead of your own safety and comfort." General Mackenzie, who had been observing the evaluation process, leaned forward in her chair. "The question we have for you is simple. Are you ready to take on missions that will test everything you've learned here and more? Are you prepared to operate in environments where failure is not just personal disappointment, but potentially catastrophic for national security?" Maria looked around the room at the faces of officers who had dedicated their careers to serving at the highest levels of military operations. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this point, from the maintenance bay where she had honed her technical skills, to this evaluation that had tested every aspect of her capabilities as a soldier and a leader. "Yes, ma'am," she replied firmly. "I'm ready." The board members exchanged glances before the president spoke again. "Congratulations, Sergeant Santos. You've successfully completed the evaluation. Report to Building 7 tomorrow morning at 0800 hours for your initial briefing on your new assignment." As Maria left the evaluation facility, she felt a mixture of pride, relief, and anticipation. She had proven herself capable of meeting the standards required for special operations, but she also understood that the real challenges lay ahead. The evaluation had been designed to test her limits, but actual missions would push her even further. The 10 days had changed her in ways that went beyond simply passing a series of tests. She had discovered capabilities she hadn't known she possessed and had been forced to confront fears and limitations that she had never previously acknowledged. Most importantly, she had gained confidence in her ability to perform at the highest levels of military service regardless of the challenges that might arise. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, new teammates, and new missions that would test everything she had learned. But tonight, she felt ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. 6 months later, Maria stood in the weapons maintenance facility of Forward Operating Base Phoenix, deep in the mountains of Afghanistan. The facility was a far cry from the well-equipped maintenance bay she had known at Fort Bragg. a collection of repurposed shipping containers and makeshift workbenches that served as the technical heart of one of the most remote American outposts in the region. Despite the primitive conditions, Maria had transformed the space into an efficient operations center. Every weapon system on the base, from individual rifles to heavy machine guns and advanced electronic warfare equipment, passed through her hands for maintenance and repair. Her reputation for keeping equipment operational under impossible conditions had spread throughout the special operations community, and units throughout the region regularly requested her services for critical missions. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of specialized training and increasingly complex operations. After completing the evaluation at Fort Bragg, Maria had been assigned to Delta Force's technical support element, a small unit responsible for maintaining the sophisticated equipment used by the most elite special operations teams. Her training had covered advanced weapons systems she had never imagined existed, electronic warfare equipment that seemed like science fiction, and specialized gear designed for operations in the most hostile environments on Earth. Her first deployment with the new unit had been to a classified location in Syria, where she had provided technical support for a series of raids against high-value terrorist targets. The missions had been unlike anything she had experienced in her previous deployments. Small teams operating with minimal support, inserting into heavily defended enemy territory to accomplish objectives that could not be achieved through conventional military operations. During one particularly challenging mission, Maria had been tasked with maintaining communications equipment for a team conducting surveillance on a terrorist training camp. When enemy forces had discovered their position and launched a coordinated attack, she had been forced to keep the communication systems operational while simultaneously providing fire support for the embattled team. Her ability to multitask under extreme pressure had been instrumental in the team's successful extraction, and her performance had earned recognition from the highest levels of Special Operations Command. Now in Afghanistan, she was part of an operation designed to disrupt terrorist supply lines running through some of the most remote and dangerous territory in the region. Forward Operating Base Phoenix served as the staging point for teams conducting reconnaissance and direct action missions across hundreds of square miles of mountainous terrain where conventional forces could not effectively operate. The base itself was a testament to the ingenuity and determination of Special Operations Forces. Built into a mountainside at an elevation of over 8,000 feet, it consisted of fortified positions carved directly into the rock, connected by tunnels that provided protection from both enemy fire and the harsh mountain weather. Solar panels and wind generators provided electrical power, while satellite communications links connected the isolated outpost to headquarters around the world. Maria's workspace occupied one of the larger caves, its stone walls lined with workbenches and tool storage systems that she had designed herself. The constant temperature and low humidity of the cave environment were ideal for maintaining sensitive electronic equipment, while the solid rock construction provided protection from both enemy attacks and the electromagnetic interference that plagued other facilities in the region. On this particular morning, Maria was working on a piece of equipment that had arrived with the previous night's resupply helicopter, an advanced targeting system that would allow sniper teams to engage targets at ranges previously thought impossible. The system combined laser range-finding, ballistic computing, and environmental sensors in a package small enough to be carried by a single soldier, but its complexity made it notoriously difficult to maintain in field conditions. As she worked, dismantling the delicate components and examining them under a powerful magnifying glass, Maria reflected on how much her life had changed since that day in Colonel Harrison's office, when General Mackenzie had first approached her about special operations. The technical challenges she now faced on a daily basis would have seemed impossible just a year ago, yet she had adapted to them with the same systematic approach that had served her well throughout her career. The sound of footsteps echoed through the cave complex, and Maria looked up from her work to see Staff Sergeant Mitchell approaching her workstation. In the months since their first meeting during the evaluation at Fort Bragg, he had become not just a trusted teammate, but a close friend whose combat experience complemented her technical expertise perfectly. "Maria," he said, using her first name in the informal way that had become customary among the small team, "we just got word that we're having visitors today. A delegation from Washington is flying in to observe our operations." Maria raised an eyebrow at this unexpected news. Visits from senior officials were rare at forward operating bases, and almost unheard of at facilities as remote and dangerous as Phoenix. The fact that officials were willing to make the dangerous helicopter flight into hostile territory suggested that something significant was happening. "Any idea who's coming?" she asked. "General Mackenzie is leading the delegation," Mitchell replied. "Apparently, she's bringing some people from the Pentagon and maybe Congress to see how special operations are conducting business out here." The news that General Mackenzie would be visiting brought a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Maria had not seen the general since her initial selection for the program, though she knew that reports of her performance had been reaching the highest levels of Special Operations Command. The opportunity to demonstrate her capabilities to the officer who had given her this chance was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Within hours, the base was buzzing with preparation for the high-level visit. Security was increased. Unnecessary personnel were confined to quarters, and detailed briefings were prepared to explain the complex operations being conducted from the remote outpost. Maria found herself selected to provide a technical demonstration of the advanced equipment being maintained at the facility. The visitors arrived in the early afternoon, their helicopters landing on the small helipad carved into the mountainside, with precision that spoke to the skill of the Special Operations pilots. General Mackenzie emerged from the lead aircraft, followed by a group of senior officers and civilian officials, whose presence at such a remote location demonstrated the importance of the mission being conducted from Phoenix. Maria watched from the entrance to her workshop as the delegation was led through the facility by the base commander. Even from a distance, she could see General Mackenzie's keen interest in every aspect of the operation, asking detailed questions about capabilities, challenges, and the performance of personnel under these demanding conditions. When the delegation reached her workshop, Maria stood at attention as the general entered her domain. The cave that served as her workplace had been transformed for the visit tools, arranged in perfect order, work surfaces spotless, and examples of the sophisticated equipment she maintained displayed to maximum advantage. "Sergeant Santos," General Mackenzie said, recognizing her immediately despite the months that had passed since their last meeting. "I've been reading reports of your work out here. Quite impressive." "Thank you, ma'am," Maria replied, maintaining her professional bearing despite the pride she felt at the recognition. General Mackenzie turned to address the other members of the delegation. "Sergeant Santos is one of our most valuable technical assets in the Special Operations community. Her ability to maintain sophisticated equipment under field conditions has been instrumental in the success of numerous high-priority missions." She gestured toward the workbench where Maria had been working on the advanced targeting system. "Show our visitors what you're working on, Sergeant." Maria launched into a detailed explanation of the targeting system, describing its capabilities and the challenges involved in maintaining its complex subsystems in the harsh mountain environment. Her presentation was clear and professional, demonstrating not just her technical expertise, but her ability to communicate complex concepts to an audience that included both military personnel and civilian officials. As she spoke, Maria noticed one of the civilian officials paying particular attention to her explanation. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 50s whose expensive suit and confident bearing suggested a position of significant authority in the defense establishment. "Sergeant," he interrupted politely, "I'm curious about your background. How did someone with your level of expertise end up in this remote location?" Maria glanced at General Mackenzie, who nodded encouragingly. "Sir, I started as a weapons maintenance specialist in the 82nd Airborne. Over the years, I developed expertise in increasingly sophisticated systems, and when the opportunity arose to serve in special operations, I was selected based on my technical skills and combat experience." The official seemed intrigued by her response. "And you're comfortable operating in this environment? The isolation, the danger, the primitive conditions?" "Yes, sir," Maria replied without hesitation. "This is what I trained for. These missions are important, and maintaining this equipment properly can mean the difference between mission success and failure, between life and death for the soldiers who depend on it." General Mackenzie stepped forward, her expression showing pride in her protégé's performance. "Sergeant Santos represents the future of Special Operations technical support. Her combination of expertise, dedication, and courage under fire makes her exactly the kind of soldier we need for our most challenging missions." The delegation continued their tour of the facility, but General Mackenzie lingered behind for a moment, approaching Maria privately. "I want you to know," the general said quietly, "that reports of your performance have reached the very highest levels of the military. You're setting a standard that others will be expected to follow." She paused, studying Maria's face carefully. There's something else. We're developing plans for an operation that will require technical expertise at an even higher level than what you're doing here. I can't give you details now, but I want to know if you'd be interested in taking on an assignment that would push your skills to their absolute limits. Maria felt her heart racing at the implications of the general's words. Yes, ma'am. I'm interested. Good. Someone will be in contact with you soon about the details. General Mackenzie glanced around the cave workshop. You've built something impressive here, Sergeant. This facility and your work in it will serve as a model for future operations. After the delegation departed, Maria returned to her work on the targeting system, but her mind was racing with questions about the mysterious assignment that General Mackenzie had mentioned. What could require technical expertise beyond what she was already providing? What kind of mission would push her skills to their absolute limits? As evening fell over the mountains, Maria found herself on the observation deck that provided a panoramic view of the surrounding terrain. The stark beauty of the landscape was breathtaking. Snow-capped peaks stretching to the horizon, deep valleys carved by ancient glaciers, and the ever-present reminder that enemy forces could be concealed in any of the countless caves and ravines that dotted the region. Staff Sergeant Mitchell joined her on the observation deck, bringing 2 cups of coffee and a contemplative mood that matched her own. So, he said, settling beside her on the crude bench that served as the deck's only furniture, General Mackenzie seemed pretty interested in your work today. She mentioned a possible new assignment, Maria replied, sipping her coffee and watching the stars appear in the crystal-clear mountain sky. Something that would be even more challenging than this. Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. You know, when we first met during that evaluation at Bragg, I wasn't sure what to expect from this whole program. The idea of integrated special operations teams bringing together specialists from different backgrounds. It seemed like it might just be another military experiment that would fall apart under real-world conditions. He gestured toward the base around them. But this place, what we've accomplished here, what you've accomplished, it proves that the concept works. We're conducting operations that would have been impossible with traditional military units. Maria considered his words, thinking about the journey that had brought her from a conventional maintenance bay to this remote outpost where she was helping to shape the future of special operations warfare. Every challenge she had faced, every skill she had developed, every obstacle she had overcome, had prepared her for this moment. Whatever comes next, she said finally, I'm ready for it. The mountain wind whistled through the peaks around them, carrying the harsh beauty and constant danger of their environment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new equipment to maintain, new missions to support. But tonight, sitting under the stars with a trusted teammate, Maria felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that she had found her calling in this demanding but rewarding corner of military service. In the distance, the lights of a helicopter could be seen approaching the base. Another night mission launching or returning. Another group of elite soldiers depending on the equipment and support that made their impossible missions possible. Maria finished her coffee and prepared to return to her workshop, where advanced targeting systems and prototype communications gear waited for her attention. The war continued around them, but here in this remote mountain outpost, a small group of dedicated professionals worked tirelessly to ensure that American Special Operations Forces maintained their technological edge. And at the center of that effort, in a cave workshop carved from solid rock, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos continued to prove that expertise, dedication, and courage knew no boundaries of gender or background, only the unwavering commitment to serve with distinction in the defense of her country. The fluorescent lights hummed in her workshop as she returned to her delicate work, each precise adjustment and calibration bringing the sophisticated targeting system closer to the perfect operation that could mean the difference between mission success and failure. Outside, the mountain wind carried the sounds of a base that never truly slept, where soldiers prepared for missions that would push the boundaries of what Special Operations Forces could accomplish. General Mackenzie's words echoed in her mind as she worked, reports reaching the highest levels, setting standards for others to follow. Assignments that would push her skills to their absolute limits. Whatever the future held, Maria knew she was ready to meet it with the same dedication and expertise that had brought her from a maintenance bay in North Carolina to this remote outpost where she helped shape the cutting edge of modern warfare.